We're trying to do a new setup here for Skype using Zoom as the call-in show, so kind of do a restart here. Welcome to the Wednesday night call-in show, and we do have our special guest back, Lieutenant Colonel Welzel from Montana, who is running for House in District 7. So we welcome Robert back to the show. United States Marine Corps, retired. Semper Fi, hoorah!
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm not sure that we actually have video or have audio, but I'm here.
So, this is something I'm really excited about. Is in the group We the People, we're working in the Supreme Court. Chris Hallett is working the legislature, and now we are finding these patriots from around the country that are going in the political arena, running for office, like Robert here running in Montana 7th District, Bruce Nathan running down in Florida for the governor race on the Republican ticket, Cash Jackson in Illinois. There's so many people. We're bringing this thing together, and we're so excited about this. We're hitting the people of this country are coming together, and we're hitting this from every angle that we can. So excited to have Robert with us, and for the good work that he's doing out there in Montana.
Now, is Robert going through?
Can you use it now?
Robert going through Skype.
Maybe not.
Okay. Are you going through Skype or are you going through Zoom?
He's over. Yeah. I can hear you loud and clear, Robert. Everything's fine now. Don't press any more buttons.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so is he through Skype or is he through Zoom?
Zoom.
Okay. All right. So let's try and take our first caller here. Let's see who we have here. Last 4 of 5406. Welcome to the Wednesday night call-in show. Who are we talking to?
I don't hear anything. Do you guys?
Nope. Sometimes it takes a minute to pick up.
Waiting on the call, guys.
It looks like they're trying to talk.
5406, welcome to Kirk's Law Corner Live. Who are we speaking with, please?
Hey guys, it's Shar. Can you hear me?
Yep. Loud and clear.
Hey, what's happening, Shar?
Hi, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, can you hear me?
Can you hear us, Shar?
Shar, can you hear us?
I have an echo.
I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. I have a question for you tonight that I would hope that you can answer for us. There's a lot of us out here that need some answers that are really carrying through on our cases or following up with congressmen to push cases through in each state.
You guys can hear her, right?
I can.
I heard that. Right. So what was the question?
What's the question, Shar? Can you hear them?
What we need answers tonight is, can we get a rundown on first fraud, and can we get a rundown on anything that you have on ADA civil violation?
I think ADA is usually state specific. I mean, there are federal minimum guidelines, but there are, every state has its own unique mechanism as far as ADA goes. The best thing to do would be to consult the congressional rules on that, because court rules are kind of all over the board. So if you follow congressional rules, you know you're going to at least be in, you'll at least be hitting what the minimum requirement of the court. So, and if the court would refuse it, you would say, well, here's the legislation from Congress, and you can always go about it that way.
Yeah, and what's the ADA? Is the court violating ADA provided guidelines, or is this an outside case that you're talking about, Shar? Because I'm a little bit familiar because I'm hearing impaired, and so I went out and educated myself a little bit about hearing impairment questions, but I didn't, put it in context for me about ADA and what the issue is.
Hold on. Now I'm things up.
Still working through. If anybody can hear me out there, we're still working on.
Yeah,
Okay.
everybody can hear you. Robert, you can hear them, right?
I just lost all audio when the center screen on the center was.
So, Kirk, say something.
Hello.
Can you hear
Can you hear
Kirk?
me now?
Robert, can you hear Kirk?
I can.
Okay. Share Angel Astro. Can you hear Kirk?
I can hear Robert.
You cannot hear Kirk or anybody speak. Say something now, please, Kirk.
I can hear you, Ted.
Okay.
Hello, Shar. Can you hear us now? Can you hear Kirk?
I got Kirk. I got him.
Okay, I don't know what. You guys can hear each other just fine, as far as I can tell.
So,
Okay.
Shar, can you hear us?
We were getting a big echo.
Can you hear me well, Shar?
I can, John. John, I brought some things to your attention. I'm doing a meeting with some congressmen in New Jersey. And I'm trying to break through a few things, of course, for We the People and for also the state of New Jersey for CPS. I have people who are bringing in and bringing forth as a unit on home intrusion of CPS on first fraud, which is at the door, which is what we're bringing together on the meeting on June 2nd. We have a lot of also ADA civil violations against of course, against people who are disabled. We want to see how we can incorporate also those in with what I'm trying to do on June 2nd and how to bring that forth. So what I need to know is, does each state have an ADA book out there that we have sets of rules for, or anything like that, to try and bust that through?
You're talking about the Americans with Disabilities Act?
Yes. Is it federal or is it per state?
John, you said you did some homework on ADA. Could you help Shar out with the ADA part?
Well, I'm still having trouble putting this in context. So are disability rights, federal law being violated by CPS or by bad state actors? Is that what's happening, Shar?
Yes, John, correct.
Okay, so if the state is violating these, and is it in ongoing cases? So like there's a court case for child custody and overly custody.
There's three that can be brought forth on that on ADA violations. Home intrusion from the door. First fraud is at the door. And that's what I'm trying to bring through. But I have about 10 cases altogether that's going to go forth on June 2nd with two congressmen, and we're doing the reform of the Constitution committee is what I'm with for advocating for New Jersey, and we have congressmen that are coming in to meet with us to discuss what we're going to do at the next level, which is the federal level. Well,
as far as like home invasion or crossing the threshold, I don't think that's. I'm not aware that that's covered in the American with Disabilities Act, but there are other federal laws and having probable cause and coming in your property and that sort of thing. getting in with American disabilities, is mostly about access and to public buildings. It's about having service animals, that sort of thing. As far as home invasion or something, I think that's protected under our constitutional rights. And I'm not familiar with that part of the ADA.
A violation of civil rights, then. It would be a violation of just plain old civil rights, then.
I would think so, yeah. I don't think that,
Correct.
Just because the person is disabled and law enforcement or some state actor is coming into your home without your permission, without probable cause, without a search warrant, then that gets down to a rights issue. That's not about an ADA issue.
Okay, so if they are disabled, then don't even go with the disabled. We're running with straight up civil rights.
Yeah,
we don't have to even say anything about the other.
You would make the state court aware that there's false arrest, or there's invasion of privacy, or coming in without a search warrant in that regard, and you could bring it to the state's attention and ask the state to stop that. But where that would get really addressed would be in federal court. And
right.
Yeah,
that's where we're going to. We're going to the next level with this. We are going higher than the state of New Jersey.
Well, also too, Shar, you brought up a lot of moving parts there. Okay, ADA is only one component of different things like knock and announce. Exclusionary rules.
The ADA is to protect persons with disabilities. So, under the ADA, you have to have wheelchair access into public buildings.
Right.
When you build a house that's for a disabled person, they have to have wider hallways. They have to have handrails. That's why we see handrails in bathrooms in public places. Because they're required to have that for wheelchair people. That's the kind of stuff that you see in the ADA. Or like in my particular instance, I'm hearing impaired, and so I have a service animal. And anywhere that a service animal can go, or anywhere the public can go, I can go with my service animal. Those are the kind of protections that are in the ADA. Again, when you're talking about illegal entry, search and seizure, without probable cause. Those are actions like I think it was Jay Moss dropped in and he made the comment that falls under 42 USC 1983, 85, and 86 if there's conspiracy. And if
John, may I chime in here a minute, because your case with respect to judges is very, very important when you talk about the ADA, and especially in relationship to service animals. And I'm going to tell you how, because you've had some judges that come in here that I believe constitute bad actors, and they have now provided access, essentially the same access that service animals get, something that's called an emotional support animal. And they're very different things. And what that has ended up in is, I know some service members that have service animals. Service animals are expensive. They're highly trained. They're extensions of the individual to give them the ability to function in life. Whereas an emotional support animal is just a comfort animal. It's given a legal definition, but it's really a pet. And I want to jump. Well, let me just finish there. You got these circumstances now where people bring ducks and hamsters and all kinds of strange things that are emotional support animals, and the operative difference between a support animal and an emotional support animal is that the emotional support animal has no special training, none. So the ADA allows access to a service animal, and that's supposed to be a specifically defined legal term, and it's supposed to include the component of training. And these emotional support animals, because of judicial interference, have now access as if they were service animals without any of the criterion that applies to service animals. And that was a situation that was created by judges. Because, however you do it. And what that ends up is my friends who have actual service animals are beginning to have issues because they have people that come in with these emotional support dogs who are unruly, who bite people. In fact, one of my friend's dogs was bitten in a Walmart just about 3 weeks ago, I think it was. And there's a distinction, and that's caused by judges who are not doing their jobs.
Yeah, I want to. Greg Parsons. I'd actually like to get this guy on the show sometime. But Greg Parsons, if there is a disability violation, Greg brought it up here. He clearly knows what he's talking about just from reading his post, and that would be addressed under the Disabilities Act, the ADA Act, 1990, under 42 USC Section 12132. And third, prejudicial discrimination and unequal opportunity resulting in.
As far as ADA advocates, we actually have an ADA advocate on the phone, Tanya Myers.
What's her last 4 digits?
She is. She's properly credentialed in Iowa. She can direct you on where to go to seek specific credentials for your state.
I've got to tell you guys also, one of the reasons why I love living in Montana is I had to look over here. I'm actually in my shop, which is outside, and it's got a bay door that has opened up. And a young fawn wandered into my shop. So, speaking of service animals, it's funny what you're saying. And
see if we can get Tanya's last 4 and get her on here, because she might be able to help out with some of those credential questions.
Is that 9142?
Yeah. And I haven't.
I have her number.
I haven't brought it up in my case because I mean, for me personally, I don't use my disability. But I know that I went into a court one time, and the judge, he said, we're just here on this one issue, right? And I, when I go into a courtroom, I always request a hearing assist device. And so they put a big freaking speaker like right in front of me. And then they have microphones for the judge and opposing counsel. And they would have a conversation without the equipment working. That's a kind of, that's definitely, where they're using a disability to their advantage. And that was something Robert touched on is these judges just kind of making crap up as they go along. And that's the big issue with it. But when they're taking advantage, and Greg was talking about some of this, Greg Parsons, I think he's down out of Texas, really knowledgeable about veterans' rights. Mm-hmm. He's a big veteran advocate down there, and he's doing some awesome work down there. And but when they start violating rights like that, we got to get Greg on here to talk about that sometime, because that's a big issue is when they're and going after veterans. And using their disabilities against them or not providing them accommodations.
Yeah. Hey, did Tanya's number, her last 4 is 9142. Let's see if she's still on there.
Yeah, she's still there. There was another one that came on.
Not my strong area. My strong area is fighting corruption.
Right.
Hi, Tanya. How are you?
5406, you're on Kirk's Law Corner Live. Who are we speaking with, please?
5406, that's Shar. 9142, right? That should be Tanya.
Yeah, 9142 is Tanya.
Tanya, you are on Kirk's Law Corner Live.
Hello, Tanya.
She, I don't know what's going on with Tanya. So maybe hang her up and ask her to call back.
Hang on a second. Let me see if I can get her over here on Messenger.
(9142) Tanya, if that's you, go ahead and speak up. Hello.
Tanya. Let me see if she's in the comments here. She was just a minute ago. Okay. Well, apparently she must be, maybe she got another call. Who knows? Well, anyway, Shar, if you can reach out to Tanya as far as specifics for ADA advocacy, she'd be the one to talk to. She, like I said, she's credentialed. But getting back to your question, are you still there?
I think Char's gone.
No, Char dropped off.
Oh, she dropped off?
Yep.
Okay, well, I think, yeah, she's still in the audience there, so I'll just address her last part of her question. Going back to like the whole CPS and all of those other things, that's another moving part. You're talking about a different agency, okay? The agency mechanism is a whole lot different than the court mechanism. And one of the problems with the agency mechanism is its influence over the court. The problem with that is the one of, like, for example, we talk about ADA requires credentials. The agency issue, it's basically dependent on what the agency guidance is. And the problem with it is the requirements do not meet the minimum standard of credentialed, properly credentialed people. So when you talk about, basically sizing somebody up for a mental instability, if that person who's doing that is just like an intake person, that's literally somebody's practicing medicine without a license. And many of these agencies are riddled with that. It's not just CPS. That's the most common one you hear about. But there's a lot of problems in a lot of the agencies with improperly credentialed or non-credentialed people actually doing some of this work that have no business doing it. And see, that's one of the things now we're having. I think it was Kansas. I was talking about this with Don Miller. They're actually trying to pass legislation or pass something through the agency or whatever they're trying to get away with, where they actually want to encourage non-credentialed people to do these jobs because they don't have the money to pay them. If you don't have the money to pay them, you don't fill a position. A position doesn't exist. And that's basically the other end of the lobbying mechanism that doesn't exist, because you've got these lobbyists, we'll just use the term loosely, who are pushing for this practice. What you need is you need somebody from the APA to go in and say, hey, hold on, time out. If you're going to be doing this, you got to have our credential, right? Here's our contract with this state that says if you're going to do that job, you got to have this credential. And until somebody actually involves the APA in something like that, you're going to end up with all kinds of problems. So again, that's why I said, when you're talking about these different things, there's a whole lot of moving parts. So when you go in and you speak to Congress, that's why I say, we were talking about this whole first fraud issue. Don't try to get overzealous with going into all of that. This one does not know this and this one's not qualified for that. You worry about, on this day, this happened and it caused whatever it caused. If there's an internal problem, let the agency and let the proper, people handle that part. You just worry about the damage that was done to you on that day at that time. And so far, that seems to be getting the most result. So it doesn't turn into a whole, cluster.
And let me Shar dropped another comment in here. So calling for alcohol, drug, and psych eval without cause, and I think that's a key comment because that's a lot of the work that we're doing now. If they chart, if you have to pay for that psych eval, or doing these tests through the government, one. If there's no probable cause, it's extortion, and that's the whole reason that they're doing it is to pay these guys that are basically in a racketeering conspiracy with the government to extort money from the people. So that's a big part of it. And Chris's argument on there, and I think it's certainly valid, is that when they're forcing people to pay for these services, that's an emoluments violation. They're persons in public trust who are being granted special privilege and getting paid for it. So I think that's another big part of it. And then also it's due process violation. You're being subjected to something without due process of law, without probable cause being there. So there's a whole lot of pieces. The racketeering and the RICO, and that is so difficult in federal court because there's so many things that you have to prove. You have a racketeering activity like the extortion under color of law, and there has to be more than one instance of it under 18 U.S.C. 1962. And then under 18 U.S.C. Or under 1961, then under 1962, you have to establish, that there's an ongoing enterprise or that it affected foreign or interstate commerce, and there's another piece to it too. And that 1962 section gets really difficult to prove of what's going on. So that's a hard way to try to protect your rights. And the federal courts always, they dismiss everything. But with that one, they're actually able to kind of get close to the rules and properly dismiss those RICO cases because the rules are so hard that they've put in place, or the statutes are so hard to satisfy to establish a RICO action. But it does get into the emoluments, and it does get into due process violations to be forced to do it without probable cause.
Yeah, and remember, there's two levels of probable cause. There's probable cause for search and probable cause for arrest. So if you don't meet both of those criteria, probable cause for arrest and for search, you're that there's a deficiency right there, and anything they get as a result of that search or seizure is excluded under the exclusionary rule.
Yeah, so. And did you see Vanessa's comment about these guys flat out invent this crap to take kids, and and then that's getting into the whole fraud side of it,
right?
And then when that fraud occurs and there's civil rights violations, then the only hope you have, I think you have no hope in state courts today to find justice. Their single purpose is to generate revenue for the state through Title IV incentives and to generate billable hours for the attorneys. You are not going to find any justice in any state court that I've seen in these jurisdictions. Is just awful. And the only hope, and it's a small hope, is in the federal government. So the real hope that we have out there is to join together and demand reform of our government to get people elected, like the guys that we have on here with Robert Welzel and some of these guys that are running for governor out there. Those are that's where we have to put our efforts, is into getting people elected that we trust and to coming together and demanding reform. That's the only way we're going to do it. You're not going to find justice in state court. You're just not. They're going to stick it to you and do whatever the hell they want without due process, without any rights, without probable cause, like making shit up, like Vanessa just said.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
John, can you hear me, John?
I can hear you, Robert. I can't see you.
Okay. All right. I've got a question for you, because small victories can make a big difference. And when you were talking about I forget the term that you use, or I'm not. I think it was emollients. Is that when there's special privileges for some, but not for others?
Correct.
To the Supreme Court. And as it turns out, if you are a lawyer, they will provide the transcripts for you at the district court and bill you for it, and you've got like a net 30 or net 60 to pay. But for a pro se, you have to pay in advance and wait 30 or 60 days to get the transcripts. And at many times, the transcripts don't come until after the time to appeal has expired.
Right.
Do you know why they do that, right, Robert?
Run the clock out.
Go ahead. Explain.
So the reason that they do that, everything is set to disadvantage litigants and to deny them due process. All of these rules that they've put in place, it's exactly for what you talked about. You're denied equal access to court records when they set up and say you have to pay for it. And what they do is they wear you down so financially that you're unable to, because what they want to do is they want to protect those appellate court judges from not looking corrupt. And they rely on the excuse, well, trial court judges make mistakes, they're just trial court judges. And to keep the appellate courts, they have to follow the rules to some extent. They can interpret the law, they can interpret the opinions, they can pick and choose whatever opinion suits their purpose. And so to beat them on the law is very difficult when you're going against these corrupt guys. But you can't beat them with the rules. I'm sorry, because you can beat them with the rules. That's how they try to keep you out of there, is by putting these roadblocks in and saying, they beat you down financially and you don't have money to pay for the transcripts. Same crap here. It's built into the industry. I never go to court without hiring my own court reporter. If an attorney hires a court reporter, they bill them. 30 days they got to pay. If myself as a pro se litigant, I got to give them $1,000 up front, and a month before the hearing, before they will even schedule a court reporter. And the whole purpose of that, if you don't have a transcript, you are screwed, because they'll make up whatever crap they want to make up. Yeah. And they'll come, and you go, in my case, they designate the record and they say, well, I want this transcript and this transcript and this transcript, which has no purpose, but they're forcing you to pay for those transcripts. And if you can't pay for them, and they designated that in the record, oh, sorry, case dismissed. You don't even get to go to the appellate court because you can't afford the transcripts. They put this legal system has put in place every stupid roadblock. Robert, here's another good example. This one, I'm getting ready to write an extraordinary writ in the United States Supreme Court, and this is one I'm going to throw in there. When you go into the Tennessee Court of Appeals, or you go into the Tennessee Supreme Court, they put a little paragraph at the bottom of an invoice that they send you for litigation tax. And it's for $13.75. That's all it is. But they put at the bottom, this litigation tax is due in 14 days. And if you don't pay it, the court may dismiss your case. Now, they put may in there because if the attorneys don't pay, well, that's no big deal. But if you're a case where you're fighting corruption and they want to use that, they use it. So that may dismiss the case, gives them the opportunity to pick and choose and to deny equal access to the court. These guys are so corrupt, they have come up with every stupid little racketeering scheme, every little trick that they can to deny us due process. And it is disgusting to me. And,
that's the question that I have, okay, because I agree with you. It is disgusting, okay? Now, you've got a case before the Supreme Court, and one of the things that you've asked is about getting 10 litigants from each county. Now, when I look at your brief, it makes reference to specific things about Tennessee. If we add people from, for example, Montana, do we have to amend that briefing to include instances of those violations with respect to Montana?
No, how we're going to do this? How we're going to do this with the other states is the brief that I have on We the People is specific to Tennessee. But when we draft the final document, and I'm not going to release it because I don't want to give them everything that I'm going to file online until we're ready to file it, because I got a few surprises for them. But in this, the basic structure of it is going to be, okay, Alabama has these unconstitutional laws. These laws were enacted to protect corruption, and these laws resulted in rights deprivations for the co-petitioner on this extraordinary writ in the nature of mandamus that we're filing in the Supreme Court. And we will list off specific statutes in Alabama. We will also list off court rules in the district courts in Alabama. The federal district courts have unconstitutional court rules that they've implemented to deny due process. Now, the value of that, the Supreme Court Rule 20 that we're going to be filing this under, it says that no relief can be obtained in any court in any form. And so if we just file this into the Supreme Court, they'll say, well, why didn't you go to the district court? Well, I say, well, we can't go to the district court because the district court is also a respondent on this case because they're just as corrupt as the state courts, and they've got all these crap rules that they've implemented to deny due process. And so we're going to stick the district courts are going to be respondents in this case. And then, or they may not be a respondent, but we're going to show it that we cannot go there. That is not a court that is going to provide us fair due process because, you know, we got issues with them too. And we'll do the same thing with the circuit courts as well, because even at the circuit court level, they got this crap. These attorneys have infiltrated and they've donned black robes and they pretend to dispense justice when all they do is gather money for the legal profession. That's all they're doing out there. Maybe in some of the criminal cases, these guys are doing a good job. But when it comes to civil cases, they're just there to take money. You know, that's all it's about.
Well, let me throw something out to you for your to mill over. You know, about 20 years ago, me and 145 other people filed suit in the DC Circuit against the IRS. And it was frankly a good case. It was a really good case. But I don't want to discuss that case at the moment. The point that I want to bring up is that these cases were all filed pro se, and they were all filed individually. And what happened is we sent them all to the federal district in DC because that's applicable to every state. You know, if you file in the Ninth Circuit like a minor in the Sixth Circuit, the ruling in that district will only apply to that district unless it goes to the Supreme Court. But if you file in the DC Circuit, it applies to all the districts. So we started this process there, and one of the things that came up is we got these attorneys from the Department of Justice whining because they couldn't handle the caseload. They said, there's only two of us, and we've got these 145 cases with all separate motions and all separate responses that they have to do. And they wanted to get the court to join them all together. And the court resisted that to their favor in that particular case. But what I was thinking about is if while you are filing your case, which is really applicable to all of us and will serve all of us, would there be value in us finding something like this transcripts issue? Small, would it be, very understandable. Something like the transcripts case, a small and defined and simple case to be filed by hundreds, thousands of people from across the country.
Here's the thing with that, Robert. I came up with that idea 3 years ago, and I said, here's an easy way that we can fix this. I have a template complaint. I will give you the template complaint. I have all of the legal arguments done. When they file a motion to dismiss, I have everything you have to file. You don't got to do any work. I've got it all done for you. No takers. This is a big problem in this country, is that the people are apathetic. they are unwilling to take the time, and we cannot organize the people of this country to do that. Thomas Jefferson said, we're deposed to suffer. And that's what he's talking about, is that individuals are, and you got to realize, Robert, when you're going through this stuff, you're emotionally damaged and you're beaten down. You lose all trust in the system. You've lost all of your financial resources. And this is how they defeat us. So even if you could get everybody fired up, they're so beaten down and they're so broken financially and emotionally that they can't do it. I would roll, and that's why in the We the People, that's exactly for that reason. I said, I will pay for everything. I will write everything. I will do all of the legal research. The only thing I want you to do is give me your name. And it's for that reason. It's because
here's something that I would offer up to you. You said you did that 3 years ago? You said you did that 3 years ago?
I'm not hearing and you're a little broken.
No, I'm apparently not coming out. You said that happened 3 years ago?
Yeah, I started going out in groups saying, let's do this. Here's the process that I suggested.
Well, here's what I was going to say, though. It says that mankind are disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable. And I would suggest to you that we are shifting to the point to where the evils are no longer sufferable. So there may be
not quite. We're very close. I think we're still a generation away from that.
You think so?
I think we're still a generation away before it gets that bad. Because they're taking kids and nobody's doing shit about it, right? Everybody is helpless. So
I thought that kids would be the line
people that go shoot at the courthouse or try to shoot a judge, but we're not at that point, where it's that bad yet that people are willing to rise up and come together. We're just not there. And these guys are so good with the media, and with the layers of protection at every level. There's no way to raise public awareness so that the entire population knows. And so the victims in this are the only ones that know about what's going on. And when you get it out, like I talk to my colleagues at work about what's going on with this, and I do it very gently. And in the beginning, it was the eye rolling and, he's just not happy with what happened in court, and they think, our justice system is fine. But over 2 years, as I just dropped, I say I drop little tidbits. They're probably like, God, has this guy ever shut up about this? But I keep feeding them a little bit. And now I think my colleagues recognize that took me 2 years to educate, a group of 10 people that I work with. We cannot educate the general population like that. These guys just keep it a secret too good. Everything is hidden. I got to tell you, Cash Jackson blew me away. I was watching a town hall meeting, Robert, and this one blew me away. I asked a question, what are you going to do about judicial corruption? And he said, we're going to provide transparency, and we're going to get video in every courtroom in the state of Illinois. And he said, and if the judiciary wants to dispute that, he said he would send in the National Guard to go in there and videotape proceedings. And I was just like, holy cow, if we had governors like that across this country who would just step up to the judiciary and not be in league with the judiciary, this crap wouldn't be happening.
You guys have a caller.
And that's where I think, we the people are trying to bond with these politicians across the country, because that's how we change it, is getting people like that into office that are going to go out there and kick their butt.
John, do you want to take this caller?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's Tanya. Let's Tanya, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you guys. Finally, somehow it didn't let me go through the first couple of times, so here I am.
There she is. What's up, Tanya?
Okay, Sean had some questions about the 88, and then I tried to call in, so I didn't hear where the conversation went. Is she still with us?
I'm not exactly sure. Shar, are you out there? If so,
I think she's on the feed, but she's not in Zoom.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and just do a quick little information skit for those that are really inquiring about the 88. The 88 goes hand in hand with everything. As I showed Chris Hallett with a lot of codes and case law, it kind of voids out a lot of things, okay? It is a civil right, and so if it's violated, it is a civil right violation. Now, as far as finding an ADA advocate qualified and educated like I am, where I particularly apply it to litigation and the courtroom, it's still kind of a newfound grassroots, if you will. Now, we go under all of the ADA, Title IV and Title V, do our debriefing of our clients of whatever their diagnosis is. We are specialized in invisible disabilities, but when we align accommodations for a client, we have to use a trier of facts, which is what a judge uses, okay? And we debrief our client and figure out what symptoms they have and what they would need in proper accommodations. Now, the most popular one is PTSD or psychosis, things like that, that I have been dealing with a lot. What we do as the ADA advocate is we first get the trier of facts done and the diagnoses, write down what we think the proper accommodations are, and it's not just a wheelchair ramp. It can be a recording device. It can be extended or shortened, expedited hearings, breaks in a hearing, a drink of a sort, like a bottle of water. Now, when we are in a courtroom, we're not there 100% just for our litigant, even though our litigant is our number one priority. We also stop legal abuse from others, okay? And I mean everybody. Prosecutors, attorneys, guardian ad litems, social workers, the judges. We are the glue that kind of binds the courts back together and brings parity back in. So to find an ADA advocate, the best thing that you can do is call disability rights and then put your state behind it. Like here in Iowa, you call Disability Rights Iowa. That would be a good start. Also contact your district court administrator, because usually they wear both hats. They wear the hat of the administrator for that court district, and they also wear the hat of the ADA coordinator, just because there usually isn't two people. They kind of just combine them. So you always want to go for that. And it's under 42 USC 12201, which is the code that we follow as to basically the interest, of things as far as like, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to ask two things. First of all, Zach brings up a comment here, says parental alienation needs to be recognized as an ADA diagnosis. Is there any progress from the APA on that? And the second thing is, are there any medical requirements like documents from doctors, other mental health professionals that might help people attain somebody like yourself through the court?
Those are both great questions. Okay, as far as the American Psychological Association, they are trying to get recognized parental alienation. Dr. Childress was the person that I know of that coined that, as far as I know, and others have followed in his trails. But I do know that hard progress is being made, and they are trying to get that recognized. However, I also particularly specialize in legal abuse syndrome, which has not been recognized by the APA either, but it is what a doctor, Miss Dr. Karen Huffer, who taught the class, did create that diagnosis and followed it on the DSM axis. Because it's the same symptoms that people suffer from in legal abuse syndrome it mirrors PTSD. Now, as far as what was your second question again, Chris?
I was asking about if there was any requirements, or if somebody had, say, a medical diagnosis that they could, hand to the court or a court officer to mandate making the court get in touch with somebody like you.
Now, a medical diagnosis, so to speak, is not always necessary. Like you can't sit there and tell me that a man with no legs should need a prescription from a doctor to tell you he needs a wheelchair. Okay. So, I mean, within reasonable bounds. Okay. Now, as far as a certified ADA advocate like myself, no, we are not to hand over. That is federally HIPAA protected information. Yes, we are to obtain information of at least one diagnosis. We don't have to have all of their diagnoses to be able to align accommodations, but we do have to see that. Okay. Now, does that get put on court record? No, it does not. Now, do we also need to file a motion to the court to align ADA accommodations? No, we do not. There is nowhere in the ADA, you let one person show me in the ADA where it says you have to and must file a motion. It doesn't. Now,
is a memorandum or some kind of notice of special appearance required by chance?
Well, that's good that you're asking that, because in some instances we have to do a notice of appearance. Okay, but that's for literally no educated courtroom. Like you guys know, I bounce from state to state to state to state because ADA is federal. I go anywhere. Now, in Iowa, we hit the ground running from certificate. Okay, as soon as we received our certificates, we educated everybody in the court system. The judges are educated. The public defender's office is educated. The Congress is educated. Everybody is educated. They know who we are. They know we're active, and they know our credentials. So when I go court to court, not everybody is educated like we are, but we've already educated all the way at the top and moved our way down here in Iowa. But the best thing to do, everybody always thinks that the lawyer has to get medical records, the lawyer has to put on docket what the accommodations are. That is incorrect. Accommodations are a medical thing. It's still medical records, so to speak. Okay, so it's still protected information. I submit the accommodations directly to the court administrator, and the court administrator, his job is to hand it over to that judge. The adversary, meaning the prosecutor and the opponents, are not to see those accommodations. They are not to see them. That is HIPAA privacy violations. So it gets kind of complicated as you're an ADA advocate. You first hit the ground running. You sit there with literally a brick wall because people don't know it. They don't understand it, even though it's been here for 18 years, but it was passed without proper funding and proper education. Does that help?
Which brings me back to our special guest, Robert. What is it? Is there something we can do from the outside to help you guys in Congress through some kind of a reporting mechanism to help establish the proper ADA? I don't know if you'd call it a schedule, if you'd call it a procedure, the liaise process. I mean, it sounds to me like a lot of the states don't even know this thing even exists. What do you think we could do in Montana for that?
They don't.
Well, one of the things that I think that, first off, can everybody hear me still? Does my audio still stink?
Yeah. Oh, no. I can hear you.
Okay. One of the things I thought about with respect to impeachments was the idea of having the legislature fund citizen councils. Okay. And I don't think they need to be funded like a boondoggle, but I mean, to cover their lunch and some per diem, it would probably be worthwhile. And if you could get some citizen councils that would hold certain public officials accountable, or at least, like when I was thinking about it with respect to impeachments, it would be recommendations for impeachments of an official that the legislature would be required to take notice of. And I've been trying to figure out ways to get the citizens involved more with the government. And it's got to have positive feedback. It's got to be it's got to be actionable. There's a couple of criteria that you have to have in order to get people involved.
Let me tell you how I want to address that, Robert.
I'm sorry?
Can I?
And you hit on a really good point. It's about accountability and for some kind of action to occur against bad actors. We can come up with great ADA legislation, we can't even get our basic right of due process enforced. Does anybody really think that getting ADA guidelines are going to do anything for us if our most fundamental right is unenforceable? I don't think so myself.
Actually, I would disagree.
If we don't have a right to be heard, if we don't have a right to present evidence, if these guys can perpetrate crimes against us, there isn't any law in the land that is going to help us. It's just going to give them something more to argue about and generate more billable hours.
John, I hear you.
Can I jump in here, guys? Can I jump in here?
We're talking about the congressional mechanism. You guys, and one of the things that I was hoping to get Robert's input on this was going to your point. If these judges are doing this blatantly to people who should be accommodated for some disability and they're not, imagine what they're doing to everybody, right? So, it's tactically speaking, it's another way of getting our message into Congress through people like Robert to say, hey, they're doing this stuff to people with disabilities. What are they doing to people without disabilities? Right? So, it's just another way to open that dialogue.
Well,
right?
I want to hit this real quick, Chris. That's a great point. And yeah, I think that's an approach. But what I think we need to do, and we learned it in the 12th century, right, Chris, which is juries and power to the people. That is the only way. The legislatures cannot be trusted because they are in league with the judiciary. It is clear by the laws that they've enacted. I pray we can get good people like you into office, Robert, who still have honor and integrity. But most of these guys do not have honor or integrity. They do not know what those words mean anymore. And so the only way to address this problem is getting power back to the people. So we need to be able to demand a jury trial. That's the only thing that's going to fix this.
Let me suggest something to you.
Let me finish one last point, Robert.
Okay,
is with the judicial corruption. We have these judicial oversight agencies that were put in place in the 70s to address the same problem that we got right now. And they quickly corrupted those agencies. And those agencies do nothing. And so the only way that we can fix that and have accountability, I guarantee, even if you get in the legislature, all those other corrupt bastards in there are not going to do anything either. And so the solution to it is power to the people. So if you file a complaint against the judge and the judge doesn't do anything, then you take that to a jury and say, here's the evidence of what this judge did to me. Do you think he violated my rights? Do you think he violated judicial canons? And let the jury decide to take that joker off the bench. Now, there's two ways that could happen. That could happen by getting good people like you in office and enacting that legislation. I don't know that that's possible. on a large enough scale to get enough politicians in there who are not corrupted. So I think, the only alternative that I truly see is to bring people of this country together and go to our government and say, we want reform, and here's the reforms that we want. And one of those is we want jury trial again, because our constitutions guarantee it. And we want jury oversight of these corrupt judicial oversight agencies who, through gross negligence, aid and abet rights violations and are guilty as principal, and nobody will enforce it. So that I honestly, that is the only way I think this is going to happen, is if we come together as a people and demand reform and force.
And that's just it, John. Because where you're going here, I think kind of the short version is when we go in and we say, all of these things that we have tried, right, have failed, right?
Yeah.
So
sure.
The answer is not to pass more legislation. The answer is to repeal the crap and go back to the jury anyway. And here's what that'll do, right? Number one, we don't need the Judiciary Committee to sign off on a repeal. We need them to sign off on passing legislation, but we don't need them to sign off on a repeal. That's a whole different animal. So,
can I jump in here, guys, for a second?
Yeah, certainly, Tanya.
Okay, that's kind of the big point that I've been trying to make as I force people to make their complaints with the Ombudsman Society. Okay, the Ombudsman Society is the overseer, the check and balance that is supposed to put these people back in check. All agencies, police departments, fire departments, you name it. My point that I have just proven from 2 years of flooding our state ombudsman society, because every state has one, is proving that it's defective. And they are not putting out reports, and they are not doing their job, and they are heavily funded. They are what we are doing. Did you know that? We are the citizens ombudsman, private attorney general, or whatever you want to call us. It is our duty. And that's what I'm trying to direct people to. Follow through with the proper checks and balances within your states. Complain to disability rights, Iowa, Pennsylvania, or whatever it is. Complain to your citizen ombudsman. Also, the one thing that people don't know is that every report from the citizens ombudsman, from the state ombudsman, that report has to be sent to, a copy of it has to be sent to the governor of every state. Not many people understand that. So when you're flooding the Ombudsman Society, you're flooding the governor too. So you're no longer going to say that Congress of that state or that governor does not know of the systemic problems that are the same and identical in every situation. So then you get to forward it over to Congress and put it on Congress's head and say, what are you doing? Why are we funding them?
Well, I was supposed to.
I have a comment that I think is applicable in this. One of the problems that I have with almost any of the legislative solutions is we have elected officials today who won't follow the Constitution, who won't follow their state constitutions, who won't follow enacted statutes already. And in many ways, we try to look for legislative or judicial or executive solutions. And I believe that the problem is much simpler than that. I'm a pretty simple guy. I'm a Marine, and we kind of cut to the chase in a lot of things. And I look at the issue of human nature. And I would submit to you that there are two things that all people respond to because it's part of their human nature. And we as people can have a very immediate effect on those things. One of them is money. Almost everybody, and it doesn't matter whether they're churchgoers or atheists or anywhere in between, everybody responds to money. So part of the reason why I like the option of impeachment, and part of the reason why I'm going to a legislative seat, is because impeachment, at the very minimum, requires that judge to respond. And that will cost him something. You know, even if he is ultimately acquitted, he had to spend money to respond. And I think that if we made them, you know, it's ironic to me that impeachment is the only weapon that the legislature was given. It's the only weapon they have for enforcing anything. They can write statutes till they're blue in the face, but if people don't comply with them, the only weapon in their arsenal is impeachment, and they never use it. And I don't think that's by mistake. So you've got the impeachment thing, and again, because it directly affects their funds. What did John say about the courts running us out of money? Well, if we start getting them having to defend themselves, it affects their money also. And as far as how to get this happen, one of the things that in our legislature, we have 100 legislatures, and 14 of them stop almost all Republican legislation. Why? Because they couldn't get the majority that they needed without these 14, and people hated these guys. So what if you get one obstinate, stubborn, pig-headed Marine in there who's going to go browbeat all the other 100 legislatures until he finds his own gang of 14 that are going to do things for the right reasons, for the constitutional reasons, and for reasons that will support the people, and say, hey, guys, you don't want to impeach this judge? Fine. You're not going to get anything else happen either. So you want to stop stuff? That's what we're going to do. Now, money was one human nature issue. The second one, I submit to you, is shame. And even though we're in a society right now that doesn't seem to show much shame, these elected officials hate the spotlight being on them, negative spotlight being on them. And that's where we as people all have one of these. We all have one of these. You know what? There shouldn't be an elected official in this country who isn't recorded almost 24 hours a day by anybody. And you know what? We ought to be putting it up, live streaming it. It's legal, and we can do it. And I'm telling you, these guys are so arrogant. They are so narcissistic. They will do something that will end their career if we capture it on video. I'm telling you, it happened. It will happen. So if we look at it as people, we can sit there and say, if we can get a couple of people, a handful of people in the legislatures who are going to take this approach by using this weapon that legislatures have, that's one element. You've got lawsuits that are being introduced. That's other elements. If you get the people stand up and say, we aren't taking this anymore, and we are going to record you. If you work for the government, you're going to be on camera. And you know what? All you need is one person to sit there and say, hey, guess what? You are my pet project. You're not going to be able to take a dump without me getting it on film. And I'm telling you, these guys will respond. It will make them nervous. They will do everything that they can to try to get away from that. But that is where we, as the people, can start getting these guys back. So it's just a thought. And I'm not saying that any of these other lawful actions that we can do aren't appropriate and that we shouldn't do them. But I'm saying those two things, you get them in their pocketbook and you get them embarrass them in public, and we will start seeing some changes.
All right.
Can we get Ted? Can we get Elizabeth Byler on?
Hold on, I've got some comments here. I've been pretty quiet here listening to a lot of this stuff, and the reality is we need to understand, and I know this is hard for people to grasp, okay? Because of the bankruptcy, the Reconstruction Acts of 1871, birth certificates, Social Security number, the trust accounts, everything's been put in trust. The Federal Reserve in 1933, everything is a corporation. The courts are a corporation. They're running a business. Even the legislative branch is a business. The executive branch is a business. The judicial, all three of them, it's all been converted into this privatized corporation. If you even look at Department of Health and Welfare, it is a private corporation. Social Services is a private corporation. Your municipal police are all private corporations. We are no longer acting fundamentally in accordance with the Constitution of the United States of America. It is just, for them, it's all void. You have the Rucker-Feldman doctrine where they all know that they're immune. It's gotten to the point where, where we're talking about right now and trying to come up with different ideas and ways to hold these people accountable, whether they're from the legislative branch, the executive branch, or the judicial branch. They all cover for each other. They all protect each other. And it's all the way up to the line. This is the harsh reality. And Mark Young, to be honest, what we really need is an Article 5. Not an Article 5 convention.
This is your audio, Kirk.
It's an Article 5 to do an audit, a complete audit of every single congressional act. And we'll start with clear back in 1912. Okay? What happened to the missing original 13th Amendment? Why did Congress, by Congressional Act 1845, extend admiralty jurisdiction back on that land? And for those of you that have heard me say this before, and Robert, you're probably going to love this. This is a 21-volume set. Okay, this is volume 2. This is Annals of America. See that. Okay, this one's volume 2. This is 1755 through 1783, Resistance and Revolution. Now,
hey, just real quick, we're having a sound problem, Kirk. I can hardly hear you.
Yeah, you're kind of going in and out, bro. Can you get closer to your mic?
It's 2.5 feet from me. It's always worked right where it's at.
Yeah.
Oh.
So
Ted, actually come back in. There was something that was fading in and out with you.
It's coming in the comments.
Yeah, something was interesting with your mic that I've never heard before. It was cutting in and out there for a second.
Yeah, I'd never heard it do that.
Might just be internet. You sound good now, I think. Keep going.
Okay, so understanding, I mean, this is the harsh reality here. We go back to, this is called the necessity, the causes and necessity for taking up arms. In creating a nation, we have to lay down the law. Okay, so per the law of nations and how we created our nation, this is actually the first declaration, July 6, 1775. This is actually where the Second Amendment comes from. Okay, I've read from here before, and I talk about this admiralty and vice admiralty jurisdiction. This is what has happened. This is what has happened. By congressional act, they've given themselves the authority, again, in 1845. They just cannot let go of this administrative military tribunal jurisdiction. They want that power and control, and they will do whatever it takes to have it. So when we're talking about removing a judge from the bench, we're talking about removing the bar. This has already been attempted. It's already been tried. Okay. This goes back to understanding what has happened in history. Back to that part of what Chris has in his practitioner's judicial report. We're talking about back to the circle in history, and we're actually past the point of where our founders were at. If this was happening back in the day, they would have already taken up arms and they would have already gone to war. Okay, it's already happened. It's in history. They made a declaration and done this. I'm not saying that we should take up arms and start killing people. Again, I put this out there. Again, same thing as Monday. We are a civilized society. We should be able to sit down and talk about this, but we're dealing with pure evil that has been around for centuries. This isn't something new. It's right here in my history book from clear back in 1775. And I've gone clear back as far as 1166 with the Aziz. And I've even gone even back to like 600 AD with the Romans. Okay? That's where original contract law comes from, and the Roman civil law. So this has been in our history for a very, very long time.
You know, Kirk, I love the fact that you talk about that kind of stuff. I really do. And you know, that's what we as Marines bring to the table. You know, we used to remember what the Air Force used to do? Remember how they build the O Club, the pool house, the golf course. They get all these amenities in place, and then they build the runway. You know, they go back to Congress for more money. Well, you know, the Marine Corps, we hand everybody a rifle and a couple of magazines of bullets. And it's like, if you get anything beyond that, man, you hit the jackpot. So we're used to working in an austere environment. Right now, we have in our civil society, we have austerity. We have austerity of thought. We have austerity of action. We have a lot of different things coming in. What that means for us is we have to devise a different method of attack. We've tried a lot of these other things. Many of us have done things that didn't work or didn't work the way that we intended. And we have shifted to a place where culturally we're essentially in a situation where we have to commit or conduct guerrilla warfare. And guerrilla warfare is unconventional tactics. It's things they don't expect. It's things that they weren't planning for, things that are outside the realm of possibility. You know, one of the things that the left does pretty well is something that's called protest. They have a protest. If you look, when a left organization has a protest, they have a mission. They have a mission statement. There's an objective that they want out of that protest. You know, a lot of times the conservative people and civil society people, they have demonstrations. They go out there and they have rallies. They're not looking for an objective to get anything done. You know, I had this idea of having, for example, a protest outside of police stations. And our demand, what we would want is our demand was to provide in person, by hand, to be able to deliver to every police officer a copy of the Constitution. We wanted to put it in their hands and say, we want, as the people, we expect you to understand what this document is. Now, when the media gets a hold of that, they can't say that to be an unreasonable demand. So, you know, you sit there and surround the police department and say, yeah, we're going to stand here until you give us the right to give every one of your officers a copy of the Constitution. There's all kinds of things like that we can do. You know, I laugh because I was telling people, I said, there's things that you can do in the shame and embarrassment side. They don't even have to be, true. I thought about, you know, what if, let's take, for example, I love some of our elected officials because they do this to themselves. But if you take and you have a 50-something-year-old judge, for example, who's married, and you take a 17-year-old teenage girl and you have her go to his door and knock on his door and hand to his wife a receipt for condoms and says, I was behind him at the convenience store and he left his receipt. I thought he might want it. You know, I mean, those are unconventional tactics. And any one of us who are married would know that his wife would be beside herself over that, you know, and there's all kinds of things that we can do. You know, call your friendly IRS office and tell them that the IRS agent keeps burying cans in his backyard. You know, I mean, these are just things. These are just simple. I mean, they're lawful. They're you know, in some cases funny.
And Kirk had a great point. This has been going on for eternal, you know, almost throughout our history. like not American history, but world history, and it's always a circle, and that pendulum swings, and then it gets too bad, and like Jefferson said, we're disposed to suffer, but when the long train of abuses becomes unbearable, then it's our duty to throw off that tyrannical government. So how has that happened in the past? For our independence, that was an armed solution, taking it back. So that happened through war. If we look at the suffrage movement, the women of that time parked themselves in front of the White House and went on a hunger strike, and they were arrested, and some of them died, and that brought change. If we look at the civil rights movement and Martin Luther King, one of my personal heroes, I love his work. He brought together the people of this country. They marched on Selma, they marched in Chicago, they marched across this country, and he died for it. Shot in Memphis, Tennessee here, and there were a lot of civil rights activists that were beaten and suffered greatly. Many of them killed down in the South for standing up. So as we look back at history, what changes it? It's the people rising up and coming together and saying, large groups of people. Now, in this movement, Robert, people try to get demonstrations to go out in front of courthouses, and you might get a couple. People are so afraid in today's world. I don't know. Maybe you guys. I don't know if the audience house out there. How many people have gone to the marches in D.C. for this cause? I have no clue. Is it a couple hundred? I don't know. Our event I went to down in Georgia, I thought we publicized that pretty well, and we had a handful of people down there. So I don't know how to kick people in the ass to try to come together as a people, because as you look back through history, at the Revolutionary War, the Civil Rights Movement, the suffrage movement, it was large groups of people coming together, and so
well, I can tell you some of the ways to do it.
That's what I'm hoping with We the People.
I think I can tell you some of the ways. One of the ideas that I had as you start building a group up is, and I'll admit this does take a certain amount of money, but it doesn't take a lot of money. You gather up some donations and you start finding an investigator who can get the addresses, the real addresses and real emails of some of these guys.
I like that idea.
Yeah. So you think about it. If there are some national investigative agencies that can get addresses on anybody. So one of them is you get the addresses, and one of the ideas is you could sign these guys up for unsavory magazines or stuff like that. I mean, if a subscription costs $20 or something like that, and it embarrasses him, fine, do that. But one of the things that we thought about too is we thought about putting up wanted posters in their neighborhoods, posting wanted posters around their neighborhood that says this guy's a fascist, or this guy is he's an unjust judge, or whatever it is. Put his picture up and put it in the restaurants, in the bulletin boards at the grocery market, and shame them. We thought about the idea, for example.
The general public is you'll begin contempt and in jail. If you're a litigant and they find out, man, you're gone at that point. They'll incarcerate you.
But if you're not a litigant, there's nothing they can say about that, right?
No, it would certainly be free speech, I think, to go post it out and say, this is a corrupt judge. But again, it's only the victims that know about it. And to get somebody who's a non-victim to do something like that, they shun the idea for a couple of reasons. This is a profound problem. As I tried to educate my colleagues about this problem, and I'm a pretty well-respected guy. I'm kind of smart. I'm well educated. I'm known for my work ethic, and so people have respect for me. And even with that, it was very difficult for me to convince people about this enormous problem that we're facing. And I think part of it is non-victims. You know, they don't know what they can do. They don't want to believe it. And if they do start to believe it, they feel powerless and they feel a little embarrassed, perhaps because they're lazy or because they don't know what to do about it. And so it is extremely difficult to educate non-victims about what's going on. And even when you tell them straight up and you stick the evidence in front of them, they look away because they're embarrassed or they don't understand it or they don't know what to do. And this is a huge problem of trying to raise awareness with this issue. And so, you know, we have to find a way to try to bring all of the victims together in this movement as one. And there has to be, I mean, there's so many court proceedings, there has to be hundreds of thousands of us out there. We got to find a way to reach them.
You know, here's another reality for people. Even if you haven't been to court, you're still being trafficked as a human with your trust account, your birth certificate, your social security card. Okay, everything is in all capital letters for a reason. Corporation, actually, the root word of corporation is corpse. Okay, when we go to the burial grounds, every single tombstone is written in all capital letters, right? It's called dog Latin. And if you look at the back of your social security card, you will see one letter and a bunch of numbers behind that letter. That is actually your trust account right there. The first letter is your division, your routing number, basically like a regular bank account. And then the rest of it is the account number. Now, there's been people out there that have attempted to utilize these trust accounts. And I haven't heard from the couple people that tried it here just recently, about a year ago now. They got a $500,000 CD and bought like a big Class A motorhome. So they ended up going to jail. You know, I don't know. I haven't heard anything since. So it's things like that are happening out there. Again, we're all being trafficked from
Kurt, I agree with you. I actually understand some of those things. But the vast majority of the United States does not. You know,
right.
And trying to get them up to speed on that. One of the problems that I found is that there is this disconnect. People will look at you and say, well, you're just trying to do that for yourself. You're just trying to take advantage of something for yourself. And you know, when we look at this stuff, we're trying to save our nation. We're trying to restore our republic and our Republican form of government. That's a big task. And that requires us to be engaged somehow or another. So there's some aspects of this where I think that we actually need to take an approach that's more collective, even though I hate collectivism. One of the things I've thought about is debt. You know, people don't understand that these trusts aren't making money out of thin air. They're actually indebting us. They put the shackles on the day you're born, and they indebt us for all of our lives and for many generations to come. Mm-hmm. And so, and I know when you start addressing why people are afraid, okay, they're afraid. I can tell you can give the list. Afraid of going to jail is not top of the list. A lot of times it's afraid of losing their job.
Yeah.
If they lose their job, will they lose their house? Will their marriage crumble? Will they still have a car? You know, we are a materialistic society. And so money has a large component on that. So one of the things I've thought about is is the idea of, I mean, it's actually an Old Testament term, but it's a jubilee. What if we wiped out the debt? You know, I've wondered if there's a legislative method to just zeroing debt across the board, everybody's debt, and starting people out. Because, you know, if banks actually looked people in the face and offered them loans because they were trustworthy and their project was creditworthy, rather than some artificial score that nobody knows or understands where it comes from, you know?
Robert, there was somebody, when I was talking, somebody said Jeff Sessions. So, you know, why don't we go to DOJ? Why don't we go to the U.S. Attorney's Office to get enforcement, right? I printed this off when I first started going through this. I printed this off from the FBI website. It says public corruption, the FBI's top criminal investigative priority. What a crock of crap that is, because it's not.
Yeah, and color of law is number 2.
It says U.S. law enforcement officers and other officials like judges have been given tremendous power by local, state, and federal government agencies. Preventing abuse of this authority, however, is equally necessary to the health of our nation's democracy. I hate they use democracy. That's why it's a federal crime for anyone acting under color of law to willfully conspire to deprive a person of right protected under U.S. constitutional law. That's straight from the FBI's website. I think it's on there. I called the FBI 4 times, went down to their office, and I said, here is clear evidence of extortion under law, witness tampering, and subpoena evasion, and they would not even talk to me. The federal law enforcement agencies are in collusion with the legal profession and the judges. Now, you think about this. Robert, I really want you to pay attention. Think about this now. This crap could not happen if our system was working. If a judge was violating rights and judicial oversight agencies were doing their job, it wouldn't happen. If federal courts were enforcing the Constitution and judges were violating rights, it wouldn't happen. If the federal law enforcement agencies like the FBI were doing their job, it wouldn't happen. And it's happening because there is collusion amongst the entire system. These guys have put this thing in place over years. You cannot defeat this argument. Every person on this comment line has suffered rights violations and much worse. Yeah. We've suffered federal crimes. This could not happen except that our government has failed us. Our government, I'll go a step further. Our government has not failed us. Our government is the perpetrator that are committing these crimes because they are aiding and abetting and they are guilty as principal. And I think, you know, our one chance is right now. Right now is the time. You know, Abraham Lincoln said, "Let not these men die in vain. Let us take increased devotion to restore this country." And that's what we have to do. We have to increase our devotion. We have to vote people like you into office. We need to volunteer to get people like you in office. We need to come together and bring lawsuit against our government and demanding reform. But we have to do it as the people. You know, It has to be a frickin' lot of us to do it. You know, we have to get out and tell each other about the projects that we're working on. You know, we have to get out and educate, like Kirk setting up this channel and getting this going so that we can bring people together to educate and draw people together to reform this country. Does that make sense to you? This shit couldn't be going on if everything wasn't broken.
Let me pose a question here.
Absolutely. You're exactly right about that stuff. In fact, one of the things that you began to talk about, and I think Kurt has hit it on the head too, is that, you know, I've thought of this idea. I call it the Liberty Journalism Project. You know, we ought to have citizen journalists who are writing stuff and actually acting like real journalists. And, you know, that's part of the education process. People have way more information than they can process at one time. And again, that's when I refer to multi-pronged approaches. how we take these things on. You know, we've got a whole squad. It's only a squad. I get it's only a squad, but you know what? They're not all riflemen. So let's use them for their skill set. And
what were you going to say?
Okay, so you were talking about you called the FBI. So another reality here. Is the Federal Reserve actually part of our form of government? Part of our government?
No.
No, it is not. So why would the Federal Bureau of Investigation be part of our government as well? Can you show me anywhere in here where FBI, the CIA, Bureau of Land Management, all those other alphabet soups are lawfully are able to be created, other than through an Article 5 process?
Right.
They don't exist in our form of government. Why do they exist now? Why does the Federal Reserve exist?
Well, that was
because Woodrow Wilson, on Christmas Eve, late at night, with a very few amount of people there, signed that basically just gave away our gold and silver standard. That's still in the Constitution, right? Still in there that gold and silver is the standard, fixed weights and measurements. That's been fixed since back then. Okay. Why do we have Federal Reserve promissory notes? It's not money. There's nothing backed by that. What is backed by that is us. The birth certificate, the trust fund. Okay, when we do that, that trust fund is in trust that you're going to pay that in taxes over your lifetime. And so they create bonds on that trust account. And that's how money gets transferred. So this omnibus bill, okay, how many newborns are now part of that funding, that budget, basically, are now in debt for the rest of their lives?
I've been so negative tonight, and I want to also give people hope out there, because there is hope. You know, the media isn't going to help us. The legislature isn't going to help us unless we get people like Robert in there. The law enforcement agencies, FBI, they're not going to help, even though it's their top priority, the investigative priority. They still don't do crap. And so all of these things that I've talked about tonight, the whole system is broken. So what is going to work? And one thing I have proven, and Robert, you said we need small victories, right? One thing I have proven now. This is a really key point that I want to make is, why is there an appearance of due process? Why do they even have a trial? Why do they not just take everything? You know, just come in and get your kids. Why do they present that appearance of due process? And it's because they have to maintain the charade.
Yes.
And so the way to defeat them is to prove that they're not providing due process, to leave no rule, no law presented to the court, and leave them no room but to rule in their favor. And it's very hard to do, but I've done it. I've kicked their ass, and I made them follow the law. And I still wasn't provided full due process, but I didn't get raped like a lot of people get raped out there. And what I proved is that there's hope. Now, again, you remember early in the conversation, I said the trial courts can do whatever the hell they want, right? They can violate rights, perpetrate crimes. They can do whatever the hell they want. The appellate courts, there's a little higher standard, and there's no difference between the state appellate courts and the Supreme Court. They're all corrupt too. Mm-hmm. The district courts and the circuit courts are also corrupt, because all this shit wouldn't be going on, right? If the district courts and the appellate courts. Now the question comes down to, does the United States, does the Supreme Court of the United States, can they get away with it? I don't think they can. At that level, they can't make mistakes. And so when we go to them and say, here's the law, here's 500,000 people complaining that we want reform, And here's what the rules say. Here's what a Bill of Rights say. We have an unalienable, indefeasible right to reform the government in such manner as we think proper. And like Chris said, even if it's not in somebody's constitution, the rights prescribed to people of one state are prescribed to everybody. Is that right, Chris?
Yes, it is. Article 4, Section 2.
So we're going to assert that right as a people of this country and demand reform. And I don't think that the Supreme Court, because it's going to be on the record, we're going to get it docketed. And if it's on the docket, I don't think they can blow it off. And I think, in that way, we can change this country.
Well, it's funny you bring this up, John. I think it was Monday we were talking about this. When you talk about what our style and our form of government is, where does your duty come from? Right? Remember, we talked about this. I think Kirk mentioned it, right? Where the duty comes from, the line that Robert also mentioned on Monday, the long train of abuses quotation. I actually used it as the closing of the preface in my judicial report, where it cites it's not just it is their right, but it is also their duty to throw off a tyrannical government, right? And here's where the wheels come off the wagon. This Crown Temple bar, and this was my original Monopoly challenge, was basically said, well, we're claiming full exclusivity and our right to in creating a process to address government. And I said, that's Monopoly. You can't do that. So that's how this was born. And they said, okay, show us what you got that's in law. Well, that's, of course, when I brought in the emoluments clause. And but I wanted to do it in such a manner that was, that was reflective of not just me as a person, as the average Joe, that was as close to the current mechanism that's going on, combined with all of my work experience, and just kind of like molded that together and created my own process and my own redress. And because I've successfully done that in multiple states, I'm getting attacked for it, the same as everybody else does. I mean, as if I'm shocked that I'm getting attacked. Here's one of the things that I always tell everybody. First of all, choose your battles.
Hey, Chris, I'm in 2 years deep of full-on attacks. You got a ways to catch up.
Yeah, right. Well, they can't beat the numbers, Tanya. We've had that conversation how many times? Yeah. And we've laughed about it.
And I even did my duty, and that was reporting to major crimes in the FBI, and they just acted like, I don't know, they didn't know nothing.
Right. So we talk about that barrier between, where we are as the people and where the government is I didn't go over the law. I didn't go under them. I went right around the bar and ended up right in the middle of judicial committee and gave them a brand new toy to play with, a brand new process. What's government's favorite thing of all time? What do they love? They love a process. That's you just gave those. They're like kids in a candy store when you give them something like this. So
you're cracking me up.
And the benefit is it not only benefits us, but it benefits them. So I had to do it in such a manner to where it said, okay, well, here it is. You know it. We know it. I'm not going to play this dancing game with you. But here's a process, a mechanism that does exist in law. It hasn't been used in 230 years, but we can kick some dust off of it and go back right around and say, well, hey, we screwed up, and if we want to go back to the 1933 debacle where they basically parked the Constitution. Hey, you know what? Let them. Who gives a shit? As long as we get our Republican form of government back. It doesn't have to be pretty. It just has to work. So, it's is it one of those things? Is it going to work? Who the hell knows?
John Mack here says they aren't going to throw their legs in the air and make it easy.
Hell no, they're not.
Reality. It's going to be a fight. We're going to have to be, perseverance.
Yeah.
Vigilant. Vigilance pays off.
I don't know if Ted Fogg is on there. There's Elizabeth Byler has been up. She's been patiently holding. She's on last four of her phone number is 6833. And she wants to give us an update on our case and talk about those ADA violations we were talking about. If we can get a break and somehow get her on. I don't know, Ted.
Hi, guys.
Yeah, Elizabeth is with you now.
Okay.
Yep.
Elizabeth.
Yes, Chris.
Hey, what are you doing?
Oh. Just patiently waiting and listening.
Yeah. Well, Tanya's on there, and give Tanya the rundown about your ADA requirement because of your accident.
Yeah, I had spoken to Tanya once before. I was actually at Auntie's house at the time. She gave me a little bit of information, but I think I'm going to have to hit up with her a little later too, because there's a lot of violations in my case. And most of them goes back to ADA, because they took my parental rights of my youngest child and adopted him out with force using ADA violations. Because of my leg, I had surgery, 7 surgeries in 7 years. And I mean, they used every violation on ADA that you could possibly think of.
That right there goes back to the point that I've been making. When the ADA was passed, it was passed with lack of education and lack of funding. So there's no longer an excuse, since it is an administrative act of Congress, okay, meaning it's an administrative rule that the judges and everybody, nobody is exempt from it, okay, not Indian territory. Nobody's exempt from it. Prisons are not exempt. Jails are not exempt. Courtrooms are not exempt. Your grocery store is not exempt. And in your case has been severely violated, as I've talked to you before. For those who do not know your case, if you don't mind me sharing a few details.
Go ahead.
Okay. This case, I want you guys to understand just the very basic nuts and bolts. This woman lost her leg in the hospital while she was under severe medication. They forced her signature on documents to sign over custody. Now, if that is not something that we should just naturally know is not okay, without having to say, hey, an act of Congress said you can't do that. You get what I'm saying?
First off, I want to stop you right there 1 second, because a lot of people are getting this wrong, and they're saying that it was a CPS or caseworker or something like that. No, it wasn't even a family member. It was a friend pretending to be a friend, I guess you should say, that had told me that I was signing a guardianship paper, turned out to be a custody consent. Me being on 3 prescribed narcotics under doctor's care cannot consent. And that's where we have the big problem. And this has been going on for 9 years as of May 20th.
Like that, I mean, when we go through probate and doing wills, the person that signed the will over here, they were heavily medicated, and they weren't sufficiently mentally capable of filling this out and signing that. So it would be the same principle, is that you're mentally deficient at that particular time. So would be called under duress, right?
Yeah.
That's called fraud.
It was obvious interference with parental custody. I mean, it's obvious interference. I have another person that I dealt with his court case. And unfortunately, that was the exact claim.
Whoever brought that document for you to sign is the first where Chris calls where the wheels fell off the wagon. That's the first part of the fraud. Whoever had the idea to bring that paperwork into you while you're in the hospital and you're on medication, you're not of sound mind at the particular moment in time. Whoever started that, initiated that, they're the one that's culpable. That's where the wheels fell off the wagon. And then anyone who uses that document is a co-conspirator, right?
Okay, so the question for you there, Kirk, is this, okay? When she had me sign that paper and she's now using that custody document to get Social Security benefits for both of my kids, including survivor benefits from their dad dying, I had no family. I had nobody to help me, and I trusted her. Now, Chris is my attorney on this case, okay, and he knows better than anybody else that has had anything to do with this case. It is one of the corruptest, and I even went to the FBI, and the FBI, once again, they are going to be investigating. Just this week, me and Chris was on a three-way call with the FBI, and they were completely blown away that this was even allowed to go on for as long as it has. And where is the cover-up coming from? And I explained everything. I mean, it has a police officer involved. It has a judge involved. It has bias, conflict of interest, ADA. You name it, the violations are there in black and white.
Now, if you guys don't mind, I'm going to read just a couple of paragraphs. And this is really narrowed in scope to judicial immunity from lawsuits. But honest to God, nobody is immune. Because like I said, it's an act of Congress. No one is immune from violations of this. Now, I want you guys to listen very carefully because I'm going to rattle some really good stuff off, okay?
Yeah.
The Supreme Court, and this is verbatim. You guys can look it up. It's from the book by Dr. Karen Huffer called Unlocking Justice. It's what we call our manual. It goes with us every court proceeding, every jail, everywhere. It goes everywhere with us. Okay. The Supreme Court has held that judges can be held liable for damages in suits where actions, which are administrative in nature, are challenged. Given this abrogation of state immunity under the ADA, claims can be brought against a state judge in his or her individual or official capacity under the ADA without regard to the doctrine of judicial immunity. Ordinarily, judges enjoy immunity from damages in suits from virtually any action they take in their capacity as a judge that requires the exercise of judicial discretion. Now, this is the case law on this one. See Stump v. Sparkman, okay? The United States Supreme Court in Forrester versus White refused to attach judicial immunity to a judge's decision to fire a court employee because the act was not judicial, quote, in nature.
Wow.
The court held that truly judicial acts must be distinguished from the administrative, legislative, or executive functions that judges may occasionally be assigned to perform. According to the Supreme Court, it is the nature of the function performed. Adjudication, rather than the identity of the court, it is the nature of the function performed, rather than the identity of the actor who performed it, a judge, that determines whether absolute immunity attaches to the act. Anytime an action taken by a judge is not an adjudication between parties, it is less likely that the act will be found to be a judicial one. Cameron versus Seats. That is the Badillo case, Badillo versus Garcia. And if you read the amicus curiae on that, you'll understand a lot more. Now, this is all, under Title II and Title III, under 42 U.S.C. 12201, and the public policy and procedures things, you can still file a federal lawsuit under 1983 because this was this was so abusive and so severe in your case that I don't think anybody would be sitting at the federal court, in all honesty, looking down at this case and saying, no, immunity still applies. No, it don't.
Okay, so question for everybody actually would be the fact that there was never a court hearing whatsoever for that day. It was September 15th, 2010, where the kidnapper, as we call her, and her sister-in-law walked into my house and had me sign that paper. It was not at the hospital. She did come to the hospital too, but that paper I can't track down because it was done by handwriting. It wasn't anything court or anything like that. It was just handwriting to her stating that she would take care of the children while I'm in the hospital. Now, after I'm home from the hospital is when the legal paperwork was put through, and she came to my house knowing, and even quote said, wow, they got you very medicated. I mean, she knew the medication I was on. She knew how vulnerable I was. I could not walk. I was told I would never walk. And over the years of 7 surgeries and then losing my leg in 2016, I had multiple of the hearings that they used these ADA violations and the fact of what happened to me. I guess the biggest problem that I'm having with all this is day one is fraud. She swore it had nothing to do with custody. She lied right there by saying it had nothing to do with custody, knowing it was a custody consent form. She then took that form into the judge, which was a very good friend of hers. And the judge filed it into the court as if we were in court, and we never were. There is no stamp on that paper, like the, what's that called, Chris? Raised seal?
Yeah, there's no raised seal. There's no, the notary is also incorrect. There's nothing correct about any of that.
Doing that ex parte communication like that with the courts is illegal in and of itself.
I thought so. Okay.
So,
all right. So there we are with the first day is fraud. Now, she has made multiple of false allegations against me that CPS has unfounded, but then later, now the update that we have right now, have you ever heard of a kidnapper being allowed to take your parental rights away?
No. This is the uniqueness about your case, Elizabeth. There's no court actors involved. There's no government involved. This is all person versus person. And, I think one of the main reasons why we've gotten why we've gotten as far as we have in your case is because it's person versus person. And they know there's no standing. There's no medical standing. There's no physical standing. There's no standing of any kind.
Well, they love those kind of cases.
Yeah.
Right? Because they can create bonds for both sides and they're going to win either way. So, if the FBI's been involved and all that good stuff, that's all good.
Plus, you get to look like a hero.
So, but I want to end the show here tonight. We're kind of way over time tonight. I know that we had technical difficulties in the beginning, but I haven't eaten since 12:30 this afternoon. I haven't had lunch or haven't had anything to eat since lunch because I go basically directly right after work to right here. So that's why I sit here and eat chocolate during the show. So we want to thank you all out there for bearing with us through the technical difficulties in the beginning there. We're trying out new stuff and trying to make things work a little bit different. We'll get there. Thank you for tuning in, sharing, share. Corner people do the we the people versus the 50 United States. The Republic. That's now back to the way it's supposed to be, right here in that Declaration of Independence, where that's the law. law of nature, where we have natural rights. And per the Seventh Amendment, that's the common law. And everything happens through the common law, not through a state court and not through a federal court. Title 42, civil rights, no. That's supposed to be right here. We're supposed to take care of business ourselves. It's not supposed to be ran by a corporation. So, any last 1 minute comment there, John? Shoot. John? All right. Chris?
I'm good to go. Thanks. Okay. I want to thank everybody for stopping by. Hope you have a great week, and we'll be posting anything we get done along the, towards the end of the week, and if we don't see you, we'll see you back on Monday.
Robert, sir, you got anything? Last 1 minute? All right.
I wanted to say that the last comment that I'm going to say is that, every would-be tyrant, their first course of action is to disarm the people. That's one of the things that they have to do. And we are being disarmed in the judiciary. And it's been happening over a number of years. It's systematic and it's ongoing. We have to resist it. You have to resist it. Or it's the first steps in losing your freedoms.
Yep.
Thanks a lot, guys, for your hospitality. I love it here, and I'd like to come as often as I can.
Absolutely, Robert. We'd love to have you back, brother.
We'll see you now.
Semper
All right,
Fi.
take care of yourself.
That means
Semper
always
Fi.
faithful. Semper Fi. Semper Fidelis. Okay? Right there. That's what that... See that, Robert?